The Witch of the Dark Forest. Jonathan had always been an avid hiker, but he had never been to this part of the forest before. The trees were tall and dense, blocking out the sun and casting an eerie shadow over the forest floor. He had planned to make it to the other side of the forest before nightfall, but as the sun began to set, he realized he had gotten lost. Panic set in as Jonathan stumbled through the darkness, his flashlight flickering as he tried to find his way back to the trail. Just as he was about to give up hope, he saw a figure in the distance. As he got closer, he saw that it was an old woman, with long white hair and a cloak that seemed to blend in with the trees. Her eyes were dark and sunken, and she had a crooked smile on her face. "Hello, my dear," she said, her voice raspy and low. "What brings you to my forest?" Jonathan was taken aback by her sudden appearance, but he tried to remain calm. "I got lost on my hike," he explained. "Do you know the way back to the trail?" The old woman chuckled. "Oh, I know this forest like the back of my hand," she said. "But the question is, do you trust me to lead you back?" Jonathan hesitated. He had heard stories of witches living in the forest, but he didn't want to spend the night wandering around aimlessly. "I guess I don't have much of a choice," he said. The old woman led Jonathan deeper into the forest, the trees growing thicker and the darkness becoming more suffocating. Jonathan felt a knot in his stomach as he followed her, his flashlight barely illuminating the path ahead. Finally, they reached a clearing, where a small cottage stood in the middle of a patch of dead grass. The old woman gestured for Jonathan to follow her inside. As he entered the cottage, Jonathan saw that the walls were lined with jars of herbs and strange objects he couldn't identify. The old woman cackled as she shuffled over to a cauldron simmering over a fire. "I've been waiting for someone like you," she said, stirring the bubbling liquid with a long wooden spoon. "Someone who's lost and in need of guidance." Jonathan backed away slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he had made a mistake in trusting this old woman, but he didn't know how to escape. Just then, the old woman turned to him, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "You see, my dear," she said, "I am not just any old woman. I am a witch, and I have plans for you." Jonathan tried to run, but his legs felt heavy, as if they were stuck in mud. The witch cackled again as she advanced on him, her hands reaching out to grab him. And then, everything went black. When Jonathan woke up, he was back on the trail, with the morning sun shining on his face. He rubbed his eyes, wondering if it had all been a dream. But as he looked down at his arm, he saw a small mark that hadn't been there before. It was the mark of the witch. And Jonathan realized with a sinking feeling in his stomach that the encounter with the witch had not been a dream. He quickly got up and began to make his way back to civilization, hoping that he would never have to return to that dark forest again. But the mark on his arm served as a constant reminder of what had happened, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the witch was still out there, waiting for her next victim. Over the following weeks, Jonathan began to experience strange dreams and visions of the witch. He would wake up in the middle of the night, covered in sweat, feeling like the witch was watching him. He tried to ignore the dreams, but they only grew more vivid and intense as time went on. One night, he woke up to find the witch standing at the foot of his bed, her eyes glowing in the darkness. "You can't escape me, my dear," she said, her voice echoing in the small room. "You belong to me now." Jonathan screamed and scrambled out of bed, running to the door and throwing it open. But the witch was nowhere to be seen, and he was left alone in the silent darkness. From that day on, Jonathan was plagued by the witch's presence, feeling like she was always watching him, waiting for him to slip up so that she could claim him for her own. He tried to seek help from friends and family, but no one believed him. They all thought he was just imagining things, that the witch was just a figment of his overactive imagination. But Jonathan knew the truth. He knew that the witch was real, and that she was coming for him. He could feel it in his bones, in the way the air around him seemed to thicken whenever she was near. In the end, Jonathan knew that there was only one way to escape the witch's grasp. He would have to return to the dark forest, face her head-on, and find a way to break her curse once and for all. It was a dangerous and daunting task, but Jonathan was determined to see it through. With a heavy heart, he set out once again into the depths of the forest, ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead. As he walked deeper into the forest, Jonathan could feel the witch's presence growing stronger, like a dark cloud hanging over his head. But he pushed on, determined to reach the cottage where he had first met her. Finally, he reached the clearing, and the cottage stood before him, just as it had before. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The old woman was there, stirring her cauldron, just as she had been on the first night. But this time, Jonathan was ready. He approached her slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. "I've come to break your curse," he said, his voice firm. The witch cackled, her eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "You think you can defeat me?" she said. "You are just a mortal, a mere human. You are nothing to me." But Jonathan stood his ground, summoning all his courage and willpower. With a fierce determination, he reached out and grabbed the witch's arm, plunging it into the boiling cauldron. The witch screamed in agony, and Jonathan watched as her body began to disintegrate, turning into ash before his eyes. He had broken her curse, and he was finally free. As he stepped out of the cottage, Jonathan felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had faced his fears and triumphed over them, and he knew that he would never be the same again. From that day on, he lived his life with a newfound appreciation for the world around him, knowing that he had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. That's it for this story. I hope you had as much fun listening to it as I did creating it. If you liked the story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story.